was national government in power at the time, and what happened was the council was sacked and some appointed commissioners were put in charge. And they were then basically sort of governing the organisation up until 2016, when there was a sort of a partial election where 6 or 7, I think, elected members were allowed to sort of rejoin. And next year it will be a fully democratic return of all elected councillors. But in that first intake of elected councillors, Lan was one of those who put her hand up to get involved. She's an ecologist by background, and well, to get back into the debate, and we were very, very privileged to be the first audience that she spoke to after being elected back in late 2016. And I can remember the gleam in her eye and the aspirational sound of what she had to say, her message. And so it's, I think, very, very relevant that now, 2 years on, we've got an opportunity to hear from her again. Having been 2 years in the job, got a sense of what the cans and can'ts are that are involved there, and what the issues are as well. So I'm, for one, really, really interested to hear what she has to say, and I'd like to welcome her now to address us.
Thank you, Ron, for that lovely, articulate intro, particularly about the background of Environment Canterbury and where we are as a council right now. I guess just in terms of some opening comments, I just wanted to mention, I don't know, I almost got a bit emotional during that credits song, Have You Ever Seen the Rain? It feels a little bit like, with the latest IPCC report about climate change, and basically this SOS to the world saying, okay, we've essentially got 12 years to do something serious in reducing our emissions, otherwise we are locking the world and future generations into a future which is totally unjust and really dangerous for them. It's sort of like, I guess I kind of feel like every talk I do now from henceforth, I just really want to start with that, because it's all about the urgency of seeing what is right in front of us, essentially. But when it comes to climate change, we can't really see it. But we know from the science that it's there. And I guess I just want to open with that, because that's sort of in the context of everything I'll talk about. It's that there's a real urgency to do something about this, and it's at a local and regional and national scale and global scale. And that, you know, we just need to be thinking about that the whole time. So I just want to start with that. But I thought, for those of you who haven't heard me speak before, I'll just do a really brief background about myself. I actually grew up in Wellington. I'm a North Islander, but total South Island convert. I eventually moved south to Dunedin, started working in the business of native fish. And started getting to know really endangered and amazing native fish, which are present mainly around Otago, Southland and Canterbury. And I started working for the Department of Conservation, went on to do my Masters, and essentially got pretty sick of working for a government department where we were basically smiling sweetly while watching native fish go extinct. So I started a freshwater organisation called Working Waters Trust, which is a charitable organisation, and we were all about working with private landowners on private land and partnering them up with community groups all around in terms of getting everyone together and working on native fish habitat restoration, which was all really lovely stuff, and I really enjoyed that work. But increasingly, as I learned more about water governance and the conversations that were or weren't happening at that level, I was sort of struck with the point of what is the point of these little restoration bubbles, essentially, where everyone's doing the right thing and doing great things for these little native fish, when on the whole, the environment on a larger scale is still, biodiversity is in decline, we're still losing wetlands, and we're not, I think, we weren't properly talking about resilience and climate change and changing our ways of managing water in particular in ways that actually provide for future generations and are actually sustainable, because we were using that buzzword a lot, as you do. So eventually I found myself on Rao Island in the Kermadec, which is halfway between New Zealand and Tonga, but it's New Zealand's northernmost island. And I was running a bunch of biodiversity and science programs there on the island. It's a population of 7 people and really remote, 5-day boat ride from anywhere. But I realised that the boat would get me back to Christchurch a week before the regional council elections. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to run for regional council. I had no idea what I was doing. But then 55,000 votes later, I was voted into Environment Canterbury, and I've had both the pleasure and a lot of the pain of being in that role now for 2 years, as Ron mentioned. And I guess today I just wanted to take this short period of time, maybe the next 10-15 minutes, to give you a bit of a flavour about some good things which have happened in that time, some bad things, some frustrations, and I mentioned the bottled here as sort of like a, there's a lot of hot, the hot topic at the moment is water bottling, and we can absolutely go into that. I won't probably talk about it heaps as part of my talk, but in questions we can talk about that a lot. So, to go into the start of this, council. When I first ran, I knew that expectations had to be low, because we were going into this, as Ron mentioned, this sort of half democratic structure where there was still half government elected councillors and half, government appointed councillors and half elected, like myself. And I was totally like went in eyes wide open about that. That was the situation. Despite that, I think there's been a lot of wins, and some of those wins could be small, sort of relatively small, and I'm sort of doubtful about what impact they might have in the long run, but some of them are actually, I think, pretty cool. So I'll just go through like a few topics about that. And so I'm going to start with climate change, because as I said, that's like the pressing thing. And when I started at Environment Canterbury, the first topic which came off the blocks was, was the block offers. And that was central government consulting with councils around New Zealand about whether they supported or didn't support offshore oil drilling, essentially. And we as a council, they didn't consult with the public, they only consulted with councils and iwi. So we as a council had an opportunity to, say whether we supported this or not. And at the time, council was absolutely certain that it was not our responsibility to engage with that conversation at all. That it was a central government issue, climate change. ECAN was a statutory body, so we did not have a responsibility to engage in that discussion at all. After a period of a few months of continually talking about this, and we had some really passionate individuals in the community and community groups come forward to council and do deputations about why it is absolutely our role. And it all culminated in this public meeting where the media were there, really passionate community members were there speaking about the importance of opposing deep sea oil drilling off the Canterbury coast. And in the space of that meeting, the council switched from all believing that it wasn't our role to actually going, oh, well, yeah, actually, no, I think if we take out the word strongly oppose. I would support that. But it was amazing, and I just thought, wow, like, yeah, it was such a good thing to happen early on, because I saw the power of the public, the power of the media, and unfortunately the councillors' reasons for changing their views were quite irrational and like random. But you know, I knew that, you know, there was ways to actually change, I don't know, the council's perception and actually put us on the right track. And that's really progressed through, I guess, that belief that there is some responsibility in terms of Environment Canterbury and engaging with climate change. That's led through into our long-term plan, which is the 10-year plan for Canterbury and how we spend ratepayers' money. And we now have a climate change integration program, which is a new program, which essentially pulls together all the work that's going on across the organisation with regards to climate change, because there was a lot of work already going on, but it was quite siloed. It brings it all together in a way that is really accessible and open for the public to see. And it has elements built into it where any significant decision that Environment Canterbury are making, we look at that in the context of climate change and in the context of emissions, and that's something that is a developing thing. And then more recently, when the government were consulting on the zero carbon bill, I was just so heartened at that time that council had moved so far in their belief about what our responsibility was that we ended up submitting as a council on zero submissions by 2050. 10 minutes to go? Yeah. Zero emissions by 2050. And that was just like, I mean, it went through pretty well. There was still some, you know, discussion about it, but yeah, there's been a change there, and that's something that I think is really positive and something to celebrate. The second win that I think is rather significant, and I'm glad you're here, Francis is one of the ECAN biodiversity staff, but it's that we've elevated biodiversity to, alongside water, being ECAN's number one priority. And in a sense, that can be seen as like, oh, but that's, you know, that's just a strategic priority, like does that really have an impact on the ground? But I think it really can, because what's happening is that, again, across all of Environment Canterbury's business, we're looking at the work we do now in the context of biodiversity. So we're looking at when we do large-scale river engineering works, which basically involves, you know, big diggers moving gravels around braided rivers and that kind of thing. We're now thinking about the biodiversity values. Can we be clearing certain scrub areas while the diggers are in the riverbed so that braided river birds have better habitat and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of knock-ons which come from that. Ultimately, we need money behind that as well to really give it some guts, but we're working on that as well. It also means that we've prioritised wetlands, braided rivers and our marine biodiversity in terms of ECAN, really looking into those and understanding what our role is and actually putting money behind it. Water. Water has been a really interesting space for Environment Canterbury, and it you know, that encompasses so many things, but I wanted to pick up on a really positive aspect that I think has changed in water, and it actually goes right to central government. So when I started at Environment Canterbury, I was aware that when you make a plan, Environment Canterbury makes a plan, and you might set, you know, better minimum flows or lease allocation, that kind of thing. You can, you know, be happy about that plan, but the plan doesn't apply to people's resource consents until those consents actually come up for renewal. And so although the plan might say something really good, people's consents might have a 20, 25 year lifespan. And so actually, the gains that you think you might be making, because you've got this great plan, won't come into effect for another 20 or 25 years. So that was a clear barrier to actually achieving what you thought you were achieving in the plan. I was really vocal about talking about this with council, and actually council agreed that this was a key problem, and we as a council talked to Minister Parker about this, and now as part of the recent RMA reforms that he's just been announced, consent reviews is part of that. And so basically it just means once you set a new plan and there's environmental benefits that come from that plan, there's going to be an automatic review in terms of consents, and you'll be able to bring them in as a whole. Well, potentially, we get to see what the legislation looks like. But potentially, you can bring the consents in as a whole, rather than prior to that, you would have to look at each consent, review each consent, and each consent holder would have the ability to take that consent to the Environment Court, and it was just like astronomical, the costs that were involved in that. I hope that made sense. That was a little bit of a blur. I think water as well is was the main learning for me in terms of the constraints which are actually imposed in this council, and this is where water bottling certainly comes into it. I came into council thinking that as councillors, you know, you almost like rule the roost. You can say, no, that's bad, don't do that. Yes, that's good, do that. Basically, you have to do what's legal. And what's legal is often incredibly constrained. And it comes down to water bottling, particularly when it's in terms of, you know, the transfer of consents. If the consent is used for the extraction of water, whether that use be industrial use, irrigation, whatever it is, if someone wants to transfer that consent, as long as it's used for the same or similar purpose, the Environment Canterbury has to grant that. That's what they have to do. And I think the constraints example was clear to me as well when Minister Eugenie Sage was had to approve a water bottling consent or.
There was no agency. It was nothing to do with the RMA. It was an overseas business.
Oh right. I just mean in terms of like what's legal, right? So in terms of her values, she might have thought actually I'm not supportive of water bottling for whatever reason, but even as a minister, she has to do what's legal. So you can't be like, this is good, this isn't. You have to change the system. And that's a huge part of what I've been doing on council. The water space as well, in terms of going into Environment Canterbury has been really interesting because we have what's called the Canterbury Water Management Strategy. And that's the overarching strategy which governs water in Canterbury, and it essentially has 10 targets which cover everything from biodiversity to environmental limits to irrigated land, and I guess I came into this term on council thinking actually the Canterbury Water Management Strategy has all the right elements for water governance to actually work. Like, you know, it's the idea that you get all the players at the table, whether they be environmental groups, farmers, industry groups, Runanga, everyone, and you all get together and you have a hard discussion about water use and what our values are, and then you all reach a lovely consensus where everyone wins because everyone's compromising with it. And as part of my role as a councillor, I've been on South Canterbury Zone Committee. It's called the Orari, Temuka, Ohi and Pareora Zone Committee. And just on Monday, I'm going to this council, combined with, I think, this current government, really has the ability to talk to each other and actually change things, I think. So we are proposing for the council that we have 14 councillors, 8 will be elected from Christchurch, the rest will be from around Canterbury, and there's been discussion and debate around that, which I can go into later if anyone's interested. But as a council, we're also proposing that Ngāi Tahu as mana whenua are actually represented at the council table, and therefore the 2 Ngāi Tahu seats that we currently have on council would remain. And we're doing that through, we've just put a local bill into Parliament, which is, I think, going to be read ideally this week, and that's going to go through a full parliamentary subcommittee process as to decide whether or not those seats are actually embedded into Environment Canterbury. There's been a lot of small little ones as well, things like, that I won't go into, but things like we have just been working with the youth development team at Environment Canterbury to establish a youth rōpū, which is basically a bunch of young people that actually can engage with Environment Canterbury issues and give a voice to younger future generations, because it's a voice that we're really, really seriously lacking. I might wrap it up there, and because I really want to take your questions and have some discussion. But overall, it's been a real privilege. Like, I absolutely love the job, and I would encourage anyone who's interested in potentially running the weekend next year to come and chat to me, because it's so amazing having as your job to like get involved with the issues and try and give a voice to the things that I think really matter. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
The business of councils and planning rules, processes, it is so dry and so deathly boring to most of us. Probably very few of you putting their hands up to actually get involved like you and to actually report back 2 years on that you love the job. So hats off to you for that. I think perhaps something that we can do, and perhaps more people will be more inclined to do, is to simply vote. You know, get out and vote, because one of the big things with local government turnouts in elections is that it's been declining for the last 2 decades or so, the percentage of people who are voting in the elections. And it really does matter, these, you know, the rules and the processes and the individuals around the table. They're really important for determining just those environmental outcomes in Canterbury. But I won't talk. We'll have 2 or 3 minutes for some questions. If anyone has a question they want to put to Lan, fire away now.
With the Ngāi Tahu seats, I kind of see Ngāi Tahu as doing some great advocacy and work in terms of sustainability and katiakitanga, and then also they have corporate dairy farms, and the Ngāi Tahu Corporation does. Do you have faith, or what's your take on how pro-environment, biodiversity, sustainability those people in those seats would be likely to take?
Great question, because it's a commonly held question which I often get. So Ngāi Tahu basically has 2 branches. One is Ngāi Tahu, the corporate entity, and that's like, the bad guy because it's got the dairy farms and we hear about that. And then you've got Ngāi Tahu, which is made up of the Papatipu Runanga, which is the 10 Runanga across Canterbury. And the corporate entity is governed by the Papatipu Runanga, like they own it, but basically the corporate entity is its own structure and it does what it does. The Papatipu Runanga, that's where you get the Ngāi Tahu values, the connection to the land and water and that kind of thing, and the appointment of these councillors would be from the Papatipu Runanga side of things. I also have a view though in terms of the corporate entity, because I kind of feel like I feel like unless we as a society change the rules and that kind of thing, then I feel uncomfortable with kind of saying, oh, but you know, you're Māori, so shouldn't you actually be doing really good things for the environment when actually they're like also struggling with all the social deprivation issues that we all are as a society. So I mean, it's interesting, but I feel like the sort of Article 2 treaty conversation where mana whenua absolutely have dominion over the land, air and water sort of trumps the concerns around that, and I personally I'm really supportive of the mana whenua being at the table, and I think I just hope that we can get that established in Canterbury, and it could be a bit of a platform for other iwi groups around New Zealand potentially to do the same. Yeah.
The non-Māori governments of these issues has not the greatest track record. So having less track record can sometimes beat having a bad track record.
One more question?
Yeah.
You know I'm going to ask you that.
Yes.
Your only public statement really about water bottling very much downplayed the effect of water bottling as an industry. Do you still hold to that view? And if you don't, what's the CHCH going to do specifically to address the effect of water bottling on our agriculture?
Yeah.
Bearing in mind there's probably a dozen industrial consents out there that are largely unutilised and could very likely be turned into water bottling consents, so that all the water available will be taken and fully allocated at this.
Yeah, okay, water bottling in general. I think it's a great issue in that it engages people's minds around water use in New Zealand, and I think water bottling is it's kind of like the most visible issue that we have in terms of people starting to understand that water use around New Zealand is totally, I guess, at the whim of whoever applies, and that we don't make value judgments about what the water is used for, apart from prioritising those ones that are community takes or community water. My view on water bottling is that I can only see it in the context of any large extractive use of water. And then when I think about water bottling and the fact that, you know, there's 24,000 consents in Canterbury, from the information that I'm given, 10 of those are water bottling consents, and that in terms of Canterbury as a whole, water bottling makes up 0.007% of water take. Now that's not to belittle water bottling as an issue, because again it's part of any big extractive take, but why I like to put it in the context of extractive takes in general is because I feel uncomfortable about my efforts going towards essentially almost like a bucket which is sitting in a giant Olympic-sized swimming pool and saying to people the bucket is the issue.
Well, we're talking about takes from a specific aquifer that we use for drinking water. I mean, you're talking about the whole of Canterbury, which is a huge area. We're talking about Christchurch,
Yeah.
which is a very small area taken from a single aquifer basically, all over Bagan without any sense to which they're interlinked,
Yeah.
which supplies our drinking water.
Yes.
So I'm not quite, I mean, you can quite figures 0.07%. You could also apply that to the whole of New Zealand, and it would be even smaller, but to me it's irrelevant. I mean, we're talking about a single or underneath Christchurch that supplies our drinking water.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to have to ask that we continue the conversation afterwards. We're sitting a bit of time, sorry.
That's cool.
But we'd like to thank Lan very much, and she's available to chat and continue talking afterwards. We are now going to go to
Reading?
the reading. Kim Taylor going to give us a short advice from New Zealand's literary class.
Okay, you have it. Okay, kia ora koutou. I have a poem by Hone Tupare, and I chose him for a few reasons, and I want to tie it into the talk. Initially, just because I'm new to his poetry, I'm a literature teacher by trade, and I liked it. So I thought, oh, nature, I'll just find a poem with some good nature imagery. But then I actually read it, and I thought it to be about a tree getting hit by a lightning bolt. But then Rowan and I discussed it more and realized, considering it was written in 1964 and it's called No Ordinary Sun, it's maybe about nuclear annihilation and the atom bomb. Because people were afraid of that stuff back then. Well, now. But now we have climate change to worry about. And I thought, well, that kind of relates to this idea of the humans having this awesome power to destroy everything that we love, almost in one fell swoop in the case of nuclear annihilation, but maybe a little more slowly with climate change. But we sort of turned around, at least it's 50 years later and we're all still here. You know, maybe we can turn around the climate change train, although you know, history will determine that. So this is called No Ordinary Sun. And I should note, as a literature teacher, I don't like telling people what a poem means, but we don't have a lot of time, so that's fine. Tree, let your arms fall. Raise them not sharply in supplication to the bright and haloed cloud. Let your arm lack toughness and resilience, for this is no mere axe to blunt, nor fire to smother. Your sap shall not rise again to the moon's pull. No more incline a deferential head to the wind's talk, or stir to the tickle of coursing rain. Your former shagginess shall not be wreathed with the delightful flight of birds, nor shield nor cool the ardor of unheeding lovers from the monstrous sun. Tree, let your naked arms fall, nor extend vain entreaties to the radiant ball. This is no gallant monsoon's flash, no dashing trade wind's blast. The fading green of your magic emanation shall not make pure again these polluted skies, for this is no ordinary sun. O tree, in the shadowless mountains, the white plains, and the drab sea floor, your end at last is written. And thank you, Honey.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Honey.
And I think this song can be dedicated to Lan as what she's going to do.
Okay, playing time again, folks. This is Queen. Let's get up and